Okay, good evening, everyone. Today we'll be discussing a few MCQs on ECG and echocardiography. The major chunk of arrhythmias has been covered in the previous lectures. So, in this presentation, I've included a few MCQs based on echocardiography also as requested. So, coming to the first question, the incorrect statement about P wave is the normal duration of P wave is less than 120 milliseconds. The normal amplitude of P wave is less than 2.5 millimeter in limb leads. P waves are normally inverted in lead AVR, or the first one third of the P wave corresponds to the left atrial activation. So the correct answer here is D, which is the incorrect statement. The normal duration of P wave is less than 120 milliseconds. The amplitude of the P wave is less than 2.5 millimeter in the limb leads, and it is less than 1.5 millimeters in the precordial leads. And talking about the depolarization, as the SA node is located in the right atrium gets activated first, followed by the left atrium. So the right atrium gets depolarized before the left atrium. But as far as the ventricles are concerned, the left ventricle gets depolarized before the right ventricle because the left bundle branch conduction occurs through the left bundle branch earlier as compared to the right bundle branch. So when we talk about the atria, the right atrium depolarizes first. So that is why the P wave that is formed is actually the combination of it's actually the summation of the depolarization of both the atria, that is the right and the left atria. So if you divide this P wave into three parts, so the first one third of the P wave will correspond to the right atrial activation. The last one third is it corresponds to the left atrial activation, and the middle one third is a combination of the two. And P waves are upright in leads 1, 2, but they are inverted in AVR. And most importantly, in lead V1, they are biphasic. So coming back to the previous question, the normal duration of P wave is less than 120 milliseconds. In the lean leads, the normal amplitude of the P wave should be less than 2.5, otherwise we'll call it hypertrophy, right atrial enlargement. And in the precordial leads, it should be less than 1.5 millimeters. They are normally inverted in lead AVR. Remember, they are biphasic in lead V1. And the first one third of the P wave does not correspond to left atrial activation, but it corresponds to the right atrial activation. So the answer D is correct here. The second question is, what is the correct statement regarding Q waves? So are they present normally in V1 to V3 leads? Do they represent the left to right depolarization of the ventricles? Width more than 2 millimeters is pathognomic, or depth more than 2 millimeter is considered pathognomic. So remember, the difference between width and depth is the vertical height, and width is the horizontal, that is the amplitude. So that's the horizontal distance. So the correct statement regarding Q waves is option D. That is, they are considered to be pathognomic when the depth of a Q wave is more than 2 millimeters. As far as the other options are concerned, we'll see how incorrect they are. So basically, the Q waves represent the normal left to right depolarization of the interventricular septum and not the ventricles. This was in the option. So Q waves represent the depolarization of the interventricular septum. Small septal Q waves are typically seen in the left-sided leads, that is 1 AVL, V5, and V6. So they may be normal. Of course, they may be less than 2 millimeters. Just in case if they are more than 2 millimeters, they are considered to be pathognomic. But sometimes in leads 3 and AVR, even normally Q waves more than 2 millimeters can be present. So there are many a times you come across ECGs of very young patients who have Q waves which are quite deeper. They can be even more than 2 millimeters, but they are present in lead 3 and lead AVR. At that point of time, you tend to ignore it because it tends to be a normal variant unless the patient has any history of prior myocardial infarction. But normally in the left leads, Q waves may be present, and in fact, Q waves more than 2 millimeter depth can be present in leads 3 and AVR. Most importantly, under normal circumstances, Q waves are never seen in the right-sided leads, that is in V1 to V3. So if Q wave is located in any of these precordial leads, it's considered specifically V1 to V3 because it may be there in V5 to V6. But if it is there in V1 to V3, it is considered to be pathognomic. So when do we consider them pathological? If they are more than 1 millimeter wide. So that is the difference between width and the depth. The depth is the vertical distance and the width is the horizontal distance. So if they are more than 1 millimeter wide, they are considered pathognomic. If they are more than 2 millimeters deep, they are considered to be pathognomic. And if the depth of the Q wave is more than 25% of the depth of the QRS complex, again is considered to be pathognomic. And specifically, if it is seen in the leads V1 to V3, you say that the Q waves are pathological. What is the normal amplitude of the T waves? We are talking here about the T waves. This is a one-liner, and remember the correct answer here is option B. That is, in lean leads, the normal amplitude of the T waves is less than 5 millimeters, and in precordial leads, it is less than 10 millimeters. Okay, incorrect statement regarding U wave. They represent delayed repolarization of Purkinje fibers. It's actually a correct answer. The maximum normal amplitude of the U waves is 2 millimeters. So anything more than 2 millimeters, you consider them to be pathognomic. So this is also a correct option. Inverted U waves are pathognomic. Yes, absolutely. Whenever you see a normal Q wave which is not more than 2 millimeters, it won't be pathognomic in most of the scenarios. But any doesn't matter what the depth is, but if it's an inverted U wave, it's always and always pathognomic. U waves become more prominent in bradycardia. Yes, as the heart rate slow downs, U waves start becoming more and more prominent. So here the incorrect answer is none. All of these are correct options regarding U wave. So U wave is inversely proportional to the heart rate. U wave grows bigger as the heart rate slows down, and they generally become visible when the heart rate starts falling below 65 beats per minute. So you can see on the monitor that patient is having bradycardia, then the U waves come up. But if there is the because of sympathetic stimulation, if the bradycardia is now overcome, then you may not see the U waves; they will disappear. So the voltage of the U wave is normally less than 25% of the T wave voltage, and maximum normal amplitude of the U wave is 1 to 2 millimeters. And these U waves are best seen in the leads V2 to V3. So prominent U waves are seen in bradycardia, like discussed now. Hypokalemia, hypocalcemia, hypomagnesemia, hypothermia. They can be present in left ventricular hypertrophy, raised intracranial pressure, and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy also. And inverted U waves are always specific for the presence of a heart disease. So inverted U waves are present in coronary artery disease, hypertension, valvular heart disease, any congenital heart disease, cardiomyopathy, or hyperthyroidism also. The next question, what is the characteristic wave seen on ECG in the hypothermia? Is it a delta wave, epsilon wave, J wave, or none of the above? So the correct answer here is J wave, which is also called as the Osborn wave, which you characteristically seen in hypothermia. So if you see this monitor, if you zoom this, you can see the temperature of the patient is 32.4. This is a point when we were coming off from the cardiopulmonary. The aortic cross clamp was just released, and the process of the heart rest, the cardiac arrest was the rest to the heart was given before coming off from cardiopulmonary bypass. So at this point of time, at this temperature, you can see a positive deflection soon after the QRS complex. So this is called as the Osborn wave. This is also called as a J wave. Why? Because it occurs exactly at the J point. So the amplitude of this Osborn wave corresponds to the degree of hypothermia. If the hypothermia is more and more severe, this Osborn wave becomes more and more prominent. So that is how you know that it's an Osborn wave. But there is a catch. The epsilon wave is also quite similar to the Osborn wave. So if you see closely, both of them are very positive deflections which are present after the QRS complex. The main difference in between the epsilon wave and the Osborn wave is the Osborn wave is called as a J wave for a reason, because it occurs exactly at the J point. Unlike this, the epsilon wave can occur anywhere in between the QRS complex and the T wave. So that is the main difference in between the Osborn wave and the epsilon wave. Is with epsilon wave is caused by the post excitation of myocytes in the right ventricle, and it is a characteristic finding which is seen in arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia. So this is the difference between Osborn waves and epsilon waves. Osborn waves are also called as the J waves because they are a dome-shaped deflection at the J point of the ECG. They are mainly seen in hypothermia as well as in hypercalcemia. They are also called as camel hump, and the amplitude of the Osborn wave varies, and it can be influenced by the degree of hypothermia. Epsilon wave is an electrical signal of depolarization that appears between the end of QRS complex and the beginning of the T wave, and it is caused by the post-excitation of myocytes in the right ventricle, and it is characteristically seen in arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia. Sometimes it becomes difficult to distinguish between the epsilon wave and the Osborn wave if an ECG is presented to you. It may be sometimes very difficult to actually gauge whether the positive deflection after the QRS complex is coming exactly at the J point, or maybe it's coming somewhere in between the QRS complex and the T wave. But in most of the cases, it will be easy for you to understand. But otherwise, just try to focus on the clinical condition of the patient and the other parameters if they are mentioned in the question. You can you'll be able to judge if it's an Osborn wave or it's an epsilon wave. And the other option in the question was delta wave. You know, delta waves occur in WPW syndrome, where there is a broadening of the QRS complex. There's an aberrant pathway. The PR interval is less than 120 milliseconds because of pre-excitation. Okay, sporic sign is seen in. It's a one-liner. Sporic sign is always seen in acute pericarditis. Basically, there are stages of pericarditis in which, in the stage one, that is in the very early stages, you see a sporic sign. Now, what is a sporic sign? So, whenever you see a downsloping TP segment, so it is a very early ECG manifestation in around 30% of the acute pericarditis patients, best visualized in